Good evening, everybody. My name is Rodney Robinson. I'm the 2019 National Teacher of the Year. I'm a 20 plus year veteran of Richmond Public Schools, and I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We have a really important conversation. It's the third day of Black History Week, where we are celebrating the stories, resilience, and varied accomplishments of Black men and youth throughout our region. Today, we are talking about Black joy, public education, and out of school time. In the age of COVID-19, where do public schools and out of school time providers go from here? Or how are Black men faring educationally? COVID-19 has impacted nearly every aspect of our lives and has disproportionately affected the lives of Black people. COVID-19 and its intersection with racial and historical trauma is a threat to our schools and our after school programs. How do we encourage resilience and Black boy joy among our men and boys? Today, our expert panelists will discuss the varied impacts of COVID-19 on Black men, on education, and on out of school times. They will help us understand how COVID-19 intersects or connects with racial and historical trauma, which has been a threat to public education. The Boys and Girls Club of Metro Richmond and Greater Richmond SCAN are excited to bring you this conversation tonight, Black Men and Mental Health, Revitalizing Black Men Resilience. Now, I've introduced myself. Once again, my name is Rodney Robinson. I'm the 2019 National Teacher of the Year. Currently, I'm a senior advisor with Richmond Public Schools in charge of two main initiatives. One is the recruitment and retainment of male teachers of color in the district, and the other is promoting our anti-racist policy agenda. And so I'm here and I'm moderating this conversation, but I got a distinguished panel here with me tonight. And I'm gonna just let them take a minute to introduce themselves and what they do. I'm gonna start first with Mr. Gordon.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Gordon. I serve as the principal of Oak Grove-Bellemeade Elementary School here in the south side of Richmond. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be with you all today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gordon. Go check in with Mr. Miller.
Good evening. My name is Sean Miller, Chief Operating Officer for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Richmond, Huguenot High School alum, spent some time at Virginia State, Christopher Newport, and also at VCU. So quite an interesting journey, but a proud RPS alum.
All right, thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Muhammad.
Peace to all my brothers and people who might be viewing this. My name is Valentine Muhammad. I'm I guess about a 15-year employee of Richmond Public Schools, graduate of Norfolk State University. I'm currently serving in the role of family liaison at George Wythe High School. So I work a lot of attendance and have a lot to talk about as it relates to that and this COVID era. Pleased to be with you. I'm humbled.
Thank you. And last and certainly not least, Mr. Thornton.
Good evening. My name is Eric Thornton. I'm currently a child and family advocate with the Greater Richmond SCAN. I'm a master social worker. However, I hold my undergrad from the Virginia State University. I currently, I'm working with children in the preschool age. I'm working towards my license, my LCSW, and currently working with play therapy with the children, but I work with Mr. Muhammad in the past as a bullying prevention and violence prevention specialist for Richmond Public Schools. So it'll be interesting to hear from all of you.
As you can see, like I said, we got a very esteemed, very knowledgeable panel here tonight to tackle this education, these topics. But before we get started, I just want to know how y'all feeling right now, because we know right now, we're going through it right now. We got the pandemic, we got racial reckoning. And then this week, we just had an ice storm come out of nowhere to just paralyze Central Virginia. So brothers, how are y'all doing?
Well, brother, if I might, I'm very excited to be on the panel with you. I listened to you when you came and spoke to our office about some of your experiences and how you were received at the White House and elsewhere. And I am truly, I don't even know you, but I am very proud of you for what you've accomplished thus far, the way you've handled yourself as the National Teacher of the Year. And I am extremely honored to be on anything that has your name attached to it. Keep up the good work, brother.
Thank you, man. I'm just honored to be serving the Richmond community. One thing I always say is I didn't grow up in Richmond. but I've been here for the past 20 years. So I feel like I'm an adopted son of this community. So whenever the community reaches out and says they need something, I'm going to be there for them. But just, mentally, how y'all doing right now? Because I know this weekend was rough. We tried to get a hotel. The hotel was overbooked. We had came back to a cold house. It was just, it was a lot to deal with. So mentally, how are you guys holding up?
Well, Riley, I'll chime in and definitely ditto what our brother Muhammad shared. I feel like at times it's like the Twilight Zone, right? Because it's always like it's something else, right? So of course we have the politics. We see the different things as far as just treatment of our Black and brown students. You've seen some national news about that. And then as it relates to the return physically to learning within the context of the physical building, what's going to happen with that? Trying to continue to encourage and motivate our faculties and staffs and our students and parents. So at times I feel like it's the Twilight Zone.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely living in the Twilight Zone. How you feeling, Brother Miller?
Yeah, the Twilight Zone reference kind of kicked in another analogy for me, but it's like Groundhog's Day. Our last day with having kids in our building and our full staff was Thursday, March 12th, 2020. So we're literally going on, basically a year, 12 months with not having our children and our staff team in place en masse like we were. And at that point in time, we had 500 kids in each of our buildings collectively across the region. And now it's not even close to that number of kids that we're serving. But so that's the work piece of it. I think personally, it's just heavy, man. I can't tell Saturday from Monday. It feels like 7 Mondays. I used to look forward to the weekends, but now it's all just running together. I did think at one point that I was excited about trying to get back to normal, but what I've come to realize over the last 12 months, specifically what's happened here in Richmond, is that the normal wasn't good. So let's not rush back to it. But as a Black man, trying to stay strong, because I'm, even though I'm 45 and wife and 2 kids, I don't know that men can really be vulnerable, regardless of everything that we read, everything that we say. It's still that state of really trying to make sure that, we stay strong visibly and physically, emotionally as well. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Brother Thornton, how you feeling?
Much as the other brothers stated, it's an honor to be on here with you, as well as you all as well. As far as the pandemic goes, I recently had twins in August. So, being stuck in the house with, newborn twins, it's like, all right, we can't go anywhere, we can't travel, we can't do, much or nothing besides go to the store, but it's definitely a challenge, as well as going into the actual building and working with kids nowadays, just seeing how a lot of our demeanors and characteristics have been impacted by this pandemic. Kids can't be kids. They can't run up and hug one another. They can't play too close. They can't eat beside one another. So it's affecting more than just our households in general, but everyone, as a whole, holistically, it's changing everything that we do.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I just got a personal question. Like, you had kids during COVID. Are you noticing them having trouble adjusting to people? Because I was talking to a friend of mine who had a baby at the beginning of the pandemic, and now that she's starting to move out, the baby's having trouble adjusting to just people.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of times, we FaceTime a lot of our friends who want to see the kids. We take a lot of pictures. Our parents and grandparents are usually the only ones that see them, because a lot of times they're in the house and we're usually providing for them as well. So, when we may go over the homes, they may be the ones to see the kids. And a lot of times they're looking like, all right, I don't remember you, but I remember your voice, so it's going to be just, something new, just trying to relate things as they go on. But we're definitely, like, as I stated, we're taking pictures, we're making markers so we can go back and teach them, later on, say, hey, this is what happened the year that you were born and what changed from that point forward.
That's awesome.
Brother Rodney, I got to chime in, Brother Thornton, much respect to you. I have twin daughters that are 3, so we could talk offline. My wife and I just had a son last year, January 30th, 2020. His name is Ali. So we've been doing a lot of Zooms and Google Meets and FaceTime. But when he sees sometimes my family members in person with the mask, he's like, who is this person? And they're like, okay, let me put my mask down so you can see me. So I can definitely relate to what you just shared.
I mean, COVID has just changed everything. And, especially, that leads into our first question of, how it's changed families, how the well-being of our young people and families has had to adapt in COVID. We know for a fact that, some of our young people are struggling, especially those that are suffering from mental health issues. We know that suicide rates among young people is on the rise as well as adults. And so how do you believe the COVID restrictions have impacted the mental health and just overall well-being of our young people and our families? Start with you, Brother Muhammad.
Thank you, Brother Rodney. Since July, I've been going into the community, visiting a lot of homes and speaking with a lot of our children and actually seeing them at the ground level. And as we already know, everything that affects any community in America affects us by 100. So, I've been a part of handing out the lunches and doing several different things. It's kind of sad to say it took our children a very long time to mask up and start using PPE as I saw them in the community. Most of the people I saw in the community until the last, I would say, 90 days or so, they really weren't paying attention to the whole masking and social distancing as I saw it in some of our communities. And Brother Sean mentioned something about the old normal. I can't imagine what our new normal is going to be like when our children come back after having their education interrupted, their socialization interrupted. I'm optimistic because we survived through any and everything. I'm optimistic that we'll get through this, but it's going to be rough for us. If we should return to school in March, I think that would be somewhat chaotic. But the restrictions have really retarded the growth and development of our children, and that all of their norms, we're adults and we can adjust and we understand some of the things that are going on behind it. The children, although they're far more resilient than we are, they really don't understand a lot of what's going on, and they can't see how this will affect them 5 and 10 years from now. If we have, one of the least accredited school districts in the state of Virginia, and now they're out of school for 3 months and then virtual learning for another 6 months, there's no way that they could have kept pace with where they were, and they were behind to begin with. So the well-being, it's kind of scary for them. They seem to be happy as I encounter them, but I don't think they really understand what's waiting for them as it relates to their development and their completion of education.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's sort of like a youthful, blissful ignorance that they all have right now. But Brother Miller, you want to chime in?
Yeah, your brother Muhammad just really hit on something that I've been saying for a couple months now, well, really almost a year now. But probably at the 3-month mark of COVID, so what's that, May, June of last year, we were having conversations with our team and weekly just to check in on mental health of each other, but also checking in on families as well. And ended up having a conversation about the fact that, okay, at that point, there was an assumption that school would have reopened in September. So just from a numbers standpoint, you're thinking, okay, kids will be behind 6 months, or they will have not been in school physically for 6 months. And I say it's something that I truly believe, and Brother Muhammad just kind of said it a lot better than I've been able to put it into words, but understanding that be it 18 months, 12 months, whatever the number of months will be that kids will not have been in school physically, we have to add that on to wherever they already were. So if they were behind in March, it's not a simple 1 for 1. It's plus 12, it's plus whatever. and really not understanding, where that starting point or that foundation or that baseline may be at. So it's just hard. And I mean, disconnection, in my opinion, has led to depression amongst our kids. And the other part about it is the families are impacted, the adults are impacted. And I find it real hard to even have a conversation now with the normal, hey, how you doing? Back in the day, it was, hey, all good, I'm good, I'm all right. But the reality of it is that we are not, we are not all right. And the thing about it is that it's just one of those things right now, trying to figure out how to cope is going to be a community-wide issue, and our babies and our families that are in need, and our communities that have been marginalized. To Brother Muhammad's point, the impact there is times 100. So
I definitely agree with that. Now, Mr. Gordon, you got the littles, I like to call them, the K-5 babies. And I know you do a lot of outreach, in the community. My wife used to work at Oak Grove, so I know the work that you all put in to get into the homes of those families. So how do you see the mental health of the families and of the children that you work with?
Yeah, so when I think about our families, and thank you for that, and major shout out to your wife, Ms. Summer Robinson, great asset here. I think about some of the financial challenges that our families face, right? Hence the whole governmental structure for the stimulus checks, right? And so having to talk to parents about paying bills, or Mr. Gordon, we're dealing with this stressor here in my family. And then the stress from the parents then transfers over to their children, to our students. I also think about the lack of socialization, how I used to be able to give a kid a high five, handshake, or a side hug, say what's going on, how you doing, or, I noticed a new haircut, or whatever it was, or even the simplistic things of, so we're right here by the Bellemeade Community Center. And so sometimes I would go to football practice, right? Because we got the Bellemeade Rams right next door, or check out a basketball game, or check out the students for the cheerleading. And now that's not even happening, right? And so I think about how our students even having a physical outlet that is positive, right? Because everybody, for the most part, is within their homes trying to stay safe as we do this whole shelter in place in the midst of COVID. So one of the things that we try to do at our school is just try to find ways to spotlight and highlight the kids who are doing what's right. And then for those students that need a little more TLC, we have some cool things here that I got to show the room here that we have here. It's called AAA, stands for Attitude, Attendance, and Achievement. And each week we try to acknowledge students for improved attendance, for their participation, just for their academic progress, because right now academically we have some students that have regressed in the midst of COVID-19.
That is awesome. Huge shout out to Sophie. I saw on Twitter she won the bike in your contest today, But there's those little things we have to do to check in with our families. How about you, Mr. Thornton?
As far as what the restrictions has impacting, as far as mental health, I deal with the younger children as well. And we have to look at how it's actually affecting our brain development. And, with the younger kids, they start from a bottom to the top development system, starting from the brainstem, on up. And us adults, we're thinking from the top to the bottom. We're already developed. We already have what we need and how we need to adjust. Much as Mr. Miller said, and we're talking about what the new normal is going to be. I feel like, honestly, in probably about 10 years or so, when we're talking about normalcy, we have to factor in what this pandemic is actually doing to the kids that have been, the kids that I had, the kids that are currently in the elementary schools right now, how it's going to impact them by the time they get to high school. What adjustments are we going to have to make by that point in time? And also, we're going to have to look at the family system as well. We have families out here who depend on things such as government assistance. They depend on the kids going to school and getting the lunches, the breakfast that they need every day. And sometimes, we have teachers who go the extra mile and make sure the kids have things for the weekends and for the evenings to eat. And we're going to have to look at how these family systems are being impacted, because much as we know, the Black families are being marginalized, have been marginalized, and more than likely will always be, as we're continually trying to uplift and move forward in our daily lives. I feel like it's going to be something we're all going to have to play a part in. And, you know, the affection that you all spoke about as well, we can't give that affection to a child that they need on a daily basis. You know, they might not get it at home, but when they come to school, when they see teachers and principals such as you all who may give them a hug, a high five, that's that warmth, that feeling, like they feel ecstatic when they get that. You know, when you tell them, oh, I like your haircut, I like your shoes, you know, something, that kind words go a long way. And a lot of times they don't get that at home. And myself, I'm a product of Richmond Public Schools. So I've seen, you know, how it's affected, you know, kids that I went to school with, you know, also, you know, the kids that I work with when I was in Richmond Public Schools. So we have to think about a lot of different things that are coming into play, you know, and as a culture, we have to continue to mold and develop our children as we go forward, you know, without that family structure. I feel that we're probably going to, you know, remain stagnant. And with something like this that's hit us hard as the way this is done, you know, we're going to have to come out fighting just as we always done. And we're going to have to fight harder than we ever have.
Amen. I mean, we got to fight because we know those inequities that existed before COVID are only, you know, have been grown during COVID. You know, you said earlier about we suffer more, you know, as the old saying, when white America gets a cold, Black America gets the flu, you know, so we're suffering more. And then I don't think the response of the, I'll be honest, Virginia government has been equitable, you know, for the simple fact that, you know, we have city councilmen and women on, you know, giving press conferences begging for vaccine distribution in their part of town, the part of town that has the most Black and brown poor people. And so there is just a constant struggle of trying to do right by your family. And it's sort of like you feel abandoned by the government. I hate to say it in a way, but it's almost like, you know, and I know this is a bad analogy from the scale of tragedy, but it's sort of like you understand the residents of New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, because here we are as residents speaking out about what our community needs, and we're having the government saying, oh, the only thing we care about is you going back to school and getting back in school by March 15th, even though we know it's not safe, we haven't gotten the vaccines. And so we're really struggling right now. And I don't think the government is doing their part as far as supporting the mental health challenges. You know, now going a little bit toward education, we know we're facing all kinds of, you know, learning loss, you know, just attendance, all kinds of challenges in education. But as we look to go back, what do you think is most important for us to deal with when I hate to use the word normal, but we get back to a sense of face-to-face learning and community? And I want to start with you, Mr. Gordon. You know, what do you see that our families and students need most?
I would say staying connected, and not to sound cliche, but love and grace. And what I mean by love and grace is grace to understand where our students have been as far as within this, almost a year or so of COVID-19 and coming back into the physical building, and then grace from the standpoint of our faculty and staff making the adjustments to come back in. So love and grace is what's on my mind, because even in the midst of the pandemic with virtual learning, it's always been about staying connected to our parents and to our students. To Brother Muhammad's point, you know, we do home visits to check in. Hey, you know, little Ali, haven't seen you in a while. What's going on, buddy? I want to support you. Do you need another laptop? Do you need a hotspot? What can I do to support you? We also had a drive through for parents and family members that needed coats and other winter items. So for me, when they return, it's about starting first with love, right? We have some students, when you think about it, perhaps our kindergarten students that never did even a pre-K program or a daycare program, and now we're having to help them learn and teach them how to walk inside of a building, right? What does it look like to be inside of a schoolhouse for those who have never been in a schoolhouse, or for those students that just simply forgot? And so I was even talking to our admin team here at Oak Grove. We have some YouTube videos where when we were in the physical building, where we had students show the right way and the wrong way of how to transition in the hallway, the right way and the wrong way, how to ask a question of your classroom teacher. So for me, love and grace is where we start.
Good, I agree 100%. Brother Muhammad.
Brothers, I was just, I agree with everything Brother Gordon said. What I was thinking about is returning to school after the summer for a fall semester, and how we would be so glad to see our friends we hadn't seen for so long. I went to Norfolk State, like I said, and I would see guys from all across the country. We didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't keep in touch. We would only see each other during semesters. And one of the concerns I have when our children return, because as I see our children, they say, we can't wait to get back in the building. We can't wait to come back. And the first few days, it's going to be all about socialization and seeing their boys and the little girl that they liked last year. They wonder what happened to her, this, that, and the third. So that's a joyful part that we can steer them and guide them through. Then after that, I'm wondering how we'll keep their attention, you know, after being on a laptop for the last 8 months. I wonder, I know the dynamic teachers, it'll be easy for them, but some of our teachers in the middle range that aren't as dynamic and aren't as great as you were in your classrooms, I'm concerned about them.
I agree. I mean, I think one thing people forget about right now is the amount of stress that teachers and administrators are going through. You know, it's going to be a major adjustment for them when they start to go back to buildings, because now you have to become accustomed to socialization again. And then I think about any teacher who started either last year or their first year was this year. You're literally having your first year, and you're a 3-year veteran, but you're in your first year all over again because you haven't been in the building. And so we really got a lot to do.
Right. Brother Robinson, one more point. You're exactly right. But think about this as well. You all know what our facilities are like. Okay. Now, our facilities were subpar before this. Now we're going to have to socially distance, and we're going to have to ventilate these rooms. What is that going to look like? Are we going to be able to adequately do this? Because I referee high school basketball, I've been in several schools in the counties that had basketball this year, and I've seen some of the things that they've done with the luxury of space that they've had. And I'm very concerned about how well we'll be able to facilitate social distancing and teaching our children when they come back.
Yeah, I'm at 100%. You know, and I think, you know, I worked inside a juvenile detention facility. How is that going to take place? How is social distancing going to take place for some of our most vulnerable learners in those types of facilities? And then I think about when I was at Armstrong, what class change looked like. You know, having 1,000 kids crammed into the hallways of that building, you know, that was built for 1,500 kids in 1968. And we know our kids are way bigger, taller, you know, than in 1968. So there's even less space. And so, Brother Miller, why don't you chime in on this?
Yeah, a couple points. I think that what will be really important is that as a community, for teachers, administrators, my staff at Boys and Girls Club, and anyone that's kid facing and family facing, I think we've got to keep the empathy that I feel like we have in place right now. I think we have to hold on to it. And I really think we're going to have to fight that muscle memory of school is back open and everything that y'all say, kids want a high five, hug, all of those things that probably are second nature in terms of the things that they've been doing. But that empathy is going to be really important for me, because feeling and really understanding that the rush to make up this space and make up the gap, for lack of a better word, you know, we're in the fourth quarter down 20. We got a heck of a fight, right? But at this point, we might just need to have a good showing and get to the next game and practice a little bit and move forward. So I played a little high school and college basketball, so I can, you know, just relate to that piece of it. But the other part, and again, it's cynical in nature, but again, we have to fight the we got to fight going back to normal or going back to our old behaviors on all fronts. As far as that's concerned. So that's just a thought that's top of mind, and again, it's keeping that empathy in place and understanding that all of us have gone through a very traumatic experience and are still continuing to go through it. And to your point, we don't know what the effects are going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now of this. And I hope it doesn't rival the crack epidemic, right? But it's no telling. And we won't know for a long time.
As a guy who coached football and actually losing games by 50 points, I definitely understand. I want the greatest coach, but I had my guys out there fighting hard. I said, look, we down 50, let's go 14 this fourth quarter and just try and win the next game. That was my philosophy a couple games. Mr. Thornton, why don't you chime in?
So from a social work standpoint, it's a term that we use called pedagogy. And basically, everyone is going to have to learn together. The teachers and students, we're all going to have to, band together. I'm an outside provider, but I'm also in the classroom with the younger kids as well from time to time. And we're all going to have to learn together. There's no other way that we're going to be able to move forward because this is something new for each and every one of us. Now, for the older kids, my question is, how is it that we can keep them interested when they come back to school? We're already in an age of technology where phones, tablets, and whatnot is the biggest thing for them. They might not even know how to write their names or read and write appropriately, age appropriately, I should say, but they know how to work a computer. How are we going to be able to utilize what we're doing right now in this pandemic and transfer it over to the school year when they go back in physically? It's definitely going to be a challenge, but also, how can we utilize sports as well? A lot of our kids, like I said, I'm from the inner city. Football was my thing. Football was my way to get out of Richmond and go and see different places and get further education. How can we utilize these kids' talents and integrate that into what we're trying to do in the classroom? I'm pretty sure as a coach, Mr. Muhammad, you refereed as well. You, Mr. Gordon, you're over the school, and right next door you got the rec center. I'm pretty sure when they see you come over there, they'll say, "Oh, Mr. Gordon's out here. Let me show off a little bit." And you, Mr. Miller, we already know the Boys and Girls Club has ample amount of activities and sports for our kids. How can we integrate sports and academics into one entity for these kids who will have trouble, when they come back into the schools, because they're going to have something to look forward to. A lot of them, they look for that football tryout, that basketball tryout, and they want these different things. They want to excel, but a lot of them just won't know how. And this pandemic is going to make it even harder because they're not going to have the same skills that they would have had with you all teaching them physically in school because of the last 8 months. How can we further increase our skill set?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. And see, me, I always, and it kind of gets on people's nerves sometimes. I'm a bit of an optimist a lot of times. When I'm given a bad situation, I often say, what are some of the positives I can take from the situation and we can grow on this? And one of the positives I'm seeing, is that there are some kids, not all, but some kids who for the very first time in their life are seeing success in schools. And so I really think those are the kids we need to we need to go after. We need to see what about this distance learning worked for you? What kept you engaged? What kept you logging in every day, doing the things that you were supposed to do that led to success? And we need to start building on that, and I think especially in Richmond right now, we're presented with a unique opportunity because it looks like school board is going to go to a year-round schedule, and so I think it provides a great opportunity for the schools, the Boys and Girls Clubs, Parks and Recs to sit down at the table and say, what sort of activities do we have to keep our students interested, to keep our kids off the streets, in schools, and in places where productive activities occur? Because we're going to have 2-week breaks here and there. And so I run the RVA Men Teach program. One of the things we're doing is we're sitting down with the brothers and saying, look, you know what works for our kids. What kinds of programs can we come up with during that 2-week intercession period that'll bring the kids into the building where we can give them the tutoring they need, but also foster those skills where they can, if it's so far as barbering, if it's a skill like working in a new studio that they're building at the tech center, what can we do? Football coaches, is there any sort of workouts we can do? What can we do, with new opportunities? One opportunity we have now is, we're a one-to-one district. Before we went into COVID, Richmond Public School, I've been in the district for 20 years, and that was been the argument for the last 20 years, whether or not we could be a one-to-one technology district where our kids could have laptops and Chromebooks in their hands. COVID hit, and overnight, we were a one-to-one district. And so I think teachers have learned new skills, students have learned new skills. So let's bring all of them to the table and say, how can we best work on our skills together to uplift the entire community? Because right now, I'm thinking this 19th century, we're all in that old public schoolhouse where we got grades K through 12, and we all need to work together to make sure that we're uplifting our entire community. And so with all these new challenges, what do you think the best outcome for youth development and out of school time programming would be? I was just, went on my little rant on how we can make things better, but how do you see we can make things better? I'm gonna start with you, Brother Thornton.
Oh, can you restate the question one more time? I was writing as I was.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's all good. It's all good. But I was just saying, how can we make this better? We see the opportunities, we see the challenges ahead of us, but there's also an opportunity coming up. And so what can we best do to take advantage of our schooling and that out of school time that our kids have coming up?
I honestly think there needs to be more focus as far as for getting finances so we can be able to do these things. How can we obtain, the grants or whatnot, to continue these programs through the summer, these opportunities. You all definitely represent yourselves every year at the state house, at the state capitol, when it comes to letting them know, like, hey, we're teachers here, we're trying to get these things done for our students and for ourselves. How can we come up with a grassroots type approach, because this is something new for all of us to say, hey, we want to create a fund where we can be able to provide these programs for these kids year round. You want year round schooling? Well, this is what we need as well. Because if we want these kids to succeed and we don't want them to fall behind any further than where they are right now, what are we going to do to ensure that in the future, not even I want to say the future, but right now, what can we do to make an impact right now? Sometimes it's too late when we're talking about the future. A lot of these kids need that right now impact. And we definitely need to have a focus on that, because if we don't, we'll lose a lot of them. We don't want to lose these kids considering where they are right now. A lot of them, like you said, we have some who are definitely showing progress with this pandemic, as far as like education, them being at home, they're able to maybe maintain better focus. Are we going to offer virtual school for them year round? Are we going to expect them to come back into the school system where it's a bunch of different things going on and not able to focus? They're able to focus at home and get these things done that they need to obtain that piece of paper. That's the goal for them at the end of their educational, I won't say their educational career, but at the end of their 12th grade year. So what are we going to do at this point in time to impact that right now?
I agree 100%. That's the end game, to get that paper and get that career going. Brother Miller.
Yeah, real good question. I think that from a really broad and maybe high level, I really feel like we need to stop separating the educational space or the academic space and the out of school time space. And I really think that there needs to be a meeting of the minds. That stuff has to merge, because quite frankly, there are positives on both sides that in one instance, one takes a back seat to the other and vice versa. I think out of school time programs could benefit from possibly having some more academic and educational rigor as part of the program. But I think it's also equal in the school building and the school day that the youth development piece that I feel like organizations like Boys and Girls Club bring to the table. I feel like there's some characteristics and behaviors that we bring to the table or could bring to the table that could really be impactful and helpful to teachers, to administrators, to whoever. And the bottom line is that I can promise you that we've had a child that might be labeled as difficult in school, but at 3:30, 4 o'clock, when they dot the doors of a Boys and Girls Club, I probably wouldn't recognize that kid if they were being described by their teacher, right? And they probably wouldn't recognize the kid if we're describing it either. So I just think the separate nature of even just saying education versus out of school time or school versus out of school time, even embedded in the out of school time piece, at some point, youth development has to rise to the surface. And we've got to understand that at those real fundamental stages, if you're in a building in the year after school and it's kindergarten through third grade, that's really childcare. Yeah. And shifting that focus now to that late elementary, that middle school piece, and just really that's where we start to inject a lot of these other spices and these other opportunities, these exposures and things of that nature. But I really think that being able to merge the two genres in a very, very meaningful way where we're not jockeying for a position and we're not competing for real estate, because it's 24,000 plus kids in the city of Richmond that need our services, and they deserve to have anybody that's dealing with youth to really band together and connect and push forward.
You know, I think it's really great that you said that, because one of the things, you know, as National Teacher of the Year, I got to travel and see so many different schools, and, you know, so many schools are just getting it flat wrong, but I saw a lot of schools that were getting it right in a lot of districts. And one common thing I noticed was that 3:30, when that school day ended, there may be 3 or 4 buses outside to take kids home. Very few kids left that building at 3:30, but what you saw was professionals coming into the building to run after school programs and do those sorts of things to keep kids engaged until 6 or 7 at night. And then you see the buses taking those students home. And that was one thing I really noticed, like good schools and good communities, kids don't leave the school. The professionals come into the school to work with the kids because they're all working together as one group for the betterment of those students.
Right, and if I could add, I also think that it's going to be important for us to recognize and realize that at some point, some kids and some families might be triggered by things that happen inside of a school building. So quite frankly, staying beyond 3:30 might not be the best move to make. But there's enough stuff to do in Richmond, and I just feel like, you know, if we can grow a money tree, there's buses where we can transport and we can get out and about, but also realizing and understanding that, you know, I walked the halls of Huguenot High School before the new building got up. I was a coach there, I was a substitute teacher there, as well as a student. And I can tell you that, you know, there are some traumatic things that can't happen, obviously, as you guys probably know, in a school system. Yes. Or in a school on a day-to-day basis. And keeping a kid in that space is triggering within itself. So I think those are things we got to be aware of as well.
Safe spaces are really, really important for kids, places where they can actually just be kids and not worry about it. Brother Gord.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Coach Steve Nuttall over at the Bellemeade Community Center, because he's a great thought partner. He and his team would assist with morning arrival of the parents coming in. Again, of course, in the physical context when the doors were open physically for students and families to come into school. So he would come in if I was, you know, working with a young person on the football team and they were having a challenging day or a moment. And, you know, I have his number on speed dial. And so either he or one of the coaches would come into the physical building, of course, with the parents' permission, and talk to that student. And it was great. And it was great because it was like, listen, man, and because we had the connection where I would go to the Bellemeade Community Center and see some of their basketball games or football games, I could say, listen, I see you work hard on that football field, on that basketball court. I need that same energy, young fella. And then, now I'm not a baller. I'm a runner by nature. So let me share. I run track, cross country, all that good stuff. But Mr. Miller, I would tell them, listen, I'm about to give you the business on some one-on-one basketball if you don't tighten up and get it together. So that connection was cool. And then it was like, You know, I would only do a couple smooth moves. I only got a couple. I got to let them think I can play, right? But then we had that connection, and Coach Nuttall would just reiterate, yo, you got to listen to Mr. Gordon. You got to listen to your teacher. You got to do your very best in the classroom. And then the coach would say, hey, Mr. Gordon, he may pull me to the side. Hey, listen, you know, I have some information that you might not know about what's going on inside the parent's household right now. And I would say, oh, man, I wish I would have known. And so we're able to support each other. So shout out to Coach Nuttall on the Bellemeade Center. And again, it just my takeaway is it takes a village. So we also have a partnership with RRHA. You know, so Miss Shelton over there, Miss Brown over there for the Hillside community in Afton, like having those conversations of, hey, what can we do to support our Hillside families, our Afton families? So it takes a village is my perspective.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Shout out to Coach Nuttall. He was one of the guys back in the day at George Wythe when I was coaching. Like I said, we didn't have a whole lot of victories on the field, but we had plenty of victories off the field as far as getting those kids through school and into college. Brother Muhammad, you want to chime in?
Yes, brothers. I like going forth. I get a chance to build on the things that you guys have said because you brothers have said everything perfectly correct. Brother Miller says some students would be better off going outside of school to boys and girls clubs and other places. But to have school as an option should be a part of our new normal. We have options now. We have computers now. The digital divide has shrunk. Shrunk? It's gotten smaller. Children have laptops and hotspots and all these things now. Is it late? Yes, it's very late. But now we have them and we can utilize them. Our teachers who have been doing virtual learning, they should be better suited to do assignments and use these devices for the best interest of our students. I heard Brother Thornton talk about football. I heard Brother Miller talk about basketball and Brother Gordon talk about running track. We must also include our students who are non-athletic. We have a lot of students. I mean, maybe 10% of our students will be athletic, maybe 20. We have a lot of students that are non-athletic. We can do chess clubs. We can do all kinds of things. I always tease my wife because she was part of the secretarial squad when we were in high school. What did they do? Probably just sat there and gossip, but they were learning to type and learn how to do certain things. And there are many things that we can teach our children outside of sports and teach them lessons from that. And I'm just enjoying listening to you brothers so much. And I'm so optimistic because we have opportunities to change some of the things that we've been doing incorrectly in the past. And we have every opportunity to do it properly now. And I don't see why we wouldn't or shouldn't.
I agree 100%. The one thing I think we need to do as far as out of school time is that we need to bring everybody to the table and talk about the trauma of COVID-19 and how that's going to look when our kids go out into the community. You know, and I say everybody, we need teachers at the table talking about how is that trauma going to translate into behavior in the classroom and give them the tools to deal with it, to, you know, not just punish a kid, but to actually have some restorative justice, to actually help to heal them from what they're going through. And then also, let's be honest, we need to have the police to the table. We need to have all those groups saying, hey, our kids are going to be acting out because they've just gone through a once in a lifetime trauma in addition to the urban trauma that they live every day. And so I really think this is an opportunity to bring everybody to the table. I really, I'm not getting too political, but we got an election this year. Let's be honest. We got an election coming up this year, and we have some vital choices to make in Virginia. Do we want to go with some of the old folks who've been making those decisions that have gotten us into these situations that are continuing to make these decisions that are just growing the inequities of Virginia? Or do we want to go with people with new, fresh ideas who've been in the community, who basically know us? I think that's really, really important as a whole, that we understand that we have an election coming up and we really need to hold some of these candidates accountable for what goes on in our communities. I don't want to hear about your school funding plan. I want to hear about what are you going to do to help impoverished Black and brown students get a better education. I want to hear what are you doing so that Black and brown students aren't targeted by the police officers. I don't want to hear just the same old political answers. And I really think that's a conversation we need to start having with our communities, with our families, and saying it's time to start holding our elected officials accountable to our communities. You know, they come around and say, hey, we want your vote. And then once they get the vote, they go back to their other side of town, and you don't never see them until 4 years later when it's time for them to ask for your vote again. I really think we need to start holding them accountable, you know. And as we sort of like we're winding this down, I just want to ask, what is the number one way we can make a substantial difference as individuals and community? You know, I gave the answer of vote, but I often say voting does nothing unless you're holding elected officials accountable to your demands and what you need as a community. So what is a way, something you see going forward, the number one way we can make a substantial difference in our communities with our young boys and girls in education and out of school time? I want to start with you first, Brother Miller.
Well, thank you for letting me go first on this question. I appreciate that. You know, I think there's a couple things. And number one, I think we've got to check our egos at the door, right? And let's leave that baggage at the front porch and just let it be where it's going to be as far as that's concerned. I also think that we've got a fair enough amount of organization that we need to do in the community as well. And what I'm seeing is that, you know, right now, you know, I see so many people being really, really, really passionate, but they're getting labeled. And when certain people start to talk, it's like, oh, there they go again. There goes Sean again. There goes Rodney talking that same old mess again. But I think what really needs to happen is that let's step into our roles. You got some people that are wonderful agitators, all right? Wonderful agitators. You got some people that are really, really good, strong organizers. And you have some other people that can put it together and help to execute all of those things together. So as a community, I think that we need to figure out how to step into those spaces and let's tell the truth. Let's accept the truth, but also let's tell the truth as well. Let's agitate, let's mix that stuff up, but let's put it all back together, leave our egos at the door, organize and execute. I think absent that, we're going to be fighting a secondary battle that's probably more impactful and debilitating than the primary one that's ahead of us as well. So agitate is fine, organize is fine, but let's put those together and execute would be a real broad level thought that I have that we should do as a community.
Man, I think ego is the biggest obstacle to change in America, plain and simple. Everybody gets their egos up and nobody wants to listen. It's time to just get rid of all that. I say you ask yourself one question. Two questions. Does this benefit my students? And does this benefit our community? After all other questions are irrelevant after that. And go to the table and sit down with people. You know, Mr. Muhammad talks about this earlier when I went, you know, my trip to the White House, you know, that was an opportunity. But at the same time, I went because that administration was doing good things with prison reform, and I represented students who were in prison. So I want to say that we have something in common. Let's sit down at the table and get this done. You know, go back to you, Mr. Muhammad. What do you think? What's one thing we can do?
Yes, brother. I worked at Beaumont Juvenile Correctional Center for 8 years, and I spent 15 years with the Department of Juvenile Justice. So I know you're familiar with it, working down at the detention center, what faces our children in the way of incarceration. Couple of things. While we hold the politicians accountable for this, that, and the third, we must also hold our communities responsible. Because within the Black community, we have everything that we need if everybody gets plugged in. I represent several organizations. If the organizations I belong to get plugged in, which I look to make sure it happens, if all of our organizations plug in, be it the church, be it the mosque, be it fraternities, sororities, this organization, Black social workers, this, that, and the third, we have plenty that can help our children. So many of us, like Brother Miller said, want to sit back and agitate and say this, that, and the third. What are you doing for our children? I really don't have an ear for you unless you can show me what you're doing as opposed to what you're saying. We have great minds here in Richmond. Just us five right here alone. Each of us know five people that know five people that know five people, and on and on and on. We can get our children anything we want if we check our egos, as Brother Miller said, put our shoulder to the grindstone and make it happen for these children. Because we can wait all day for people outside of our community to come save our children. We've been waiting all day for some time. They're not going to come. And when they come, they don't have the effort or the spirit that we should have when looking to help our children. Because if we don't help them, we have the drug man, we have a national gang scourge going on, looking to recruit our children. We have so many adversaries to our children. If we don't protect our children and guide them in the right ways, they'll find themselves down at the detention center or Beaumont or Bonaire and what have you, or just out of school, uneducated and looking crazy. And we can beat that. We're better than that. So I encourage us all to get plugged in and help.
Thank you, man. Man, that's what, like I said, New Jack City, we all we got sometimes. We got to step up and do it. Brother Thornton.
Yeah, definitely. I think that much as you all stated, it needs to be a community effort. We need to hold these politicians accountable for the actions that they're putting out there right now. We need to go after what we need. We have these families who are electing these people, much as you stated, and they're not doing anything for us. And then as a community, we're just sitting back and continuing to take these things. And we can't have that anymore. It's put us in a bad position. It always has been. We hear a lot of people, much as you said, Mr. Miller, about the agitators, the people who talk a good talk, but don't back it up. We can't have that anymore. We need people who are actually going to go out there. Like you said, us five right here, we all play a significant part of everyone's lives that we come in contact with in our daily businesses. But we also need to recreate the Black family, in my opinion. Right now, I feel that I don't want to say that it's an absence of the Black male in the Black family, because I feel that over the past, a few years from what I've been seeing, we have Black fathers who are still willing and always will be able to be there for their children. But we have so many relationship issues, that stem from years past. They're learning from people who didn't have a good household themselves, so we have to go in, we have to fix ourselves before we can do anything else, and also we have to address the trauma that these kids are facing every day. We have kids who live in war zones, that impact that it has on their mind is significant. A lot of times, many people that they come encounter with in the schools, they don't understand that these kids go home and all they hear are gunshots. They come home and they see domestic violence. They see parents who are on drugs. They see family members who are constantly at one another. We have to make a change within our community, starting with our families and ourselves before we do anything else, because people will not take us serious in the work that we do unless we start with ourselves. And, I can tell from each and one of you that you all play an integral part, for these kids in their lives, and I commend you all for all that you do, especially in the education system. It's hard for you all to go in and teach every day. It's hard for you to go and interact with the families every day, Mr. Muhammad, because I remember they'll look at us when they open the door and say, "What you doing here? What you want?" But, we have to go back and we have to recreate this family aspect. It's not just our kids, it's the neighbors, it's everyone. We got our fake cousins. We need to all come back together and be as we once were. At one point in time, our family system has been, it was taken apart, and we allowed that. We have not done enough to rebuild our family systems and strengthen it up again as we once have before. We need to all come back together.
And that's a word, Brother Thornton. That's a word. Mr. Gordon.
Wow, you all have dropped a lot of excellent, powerful nuggets. What comes to mind as I reflect is we all are revolutionaries, right? And so what I mean by that is it starts with us, the power of one. It starts with our mindset. It starts with Mr. Thornton with the twins, you being actively engaged and involved in your twins' lives and changing those diapers late at night to provide support to your wife. And it starts with me, with my 3 children and my wife being there for them, right? Because if I am trying to create a school culture that is positive and nurturing along with our faculty and staff, it doesn't really count if we can create that for our schools, but we don't really have that within our own homes. So my point is, as a revolutionary, we have to model what we want to see. We have to be fully engaged with our own families. Yes, we have to advocate for things to change politically and socially and even financially, and we have to discuss the trauma that our students are facing. And then I also think at times, and our faculty and staff at Oak Grove has done an outstanding job, at times we are extensions to our students as surrogate moms and dads and surrogate uncles and aunties and big brothers and grandmothers, because for whatever reason, maybe they didn't have that. I know growing up in my life, when my parents divorced when I was 8 years old, I had men that stepped into my life actively that would say, hey, I'm taking you to the baseball game, or hey, I'm taking you fishing, I'm taking you camping. Whatever it was, they were engaged with me. And so I think as revolutionaries, we have to make sure we're modeling what we want for our children and for the future.
I mean, those are the words right there. That's where we're going to end the night. I want to thank you, brothers, for this conversation. I think we've hit on some great points. You all have hit on some great points tonight. And I hope that people take this as a charge, as a charge to say, I'm going to do better for my family. I'm going to do better for my community. I'm going to do more than just say, hey, how you doing, brother? I'm good. Nah, that don't work no more. Why are you good? What's not good? We really need to start asking probing questions and checking up on everybody. Like I said, we got, and I just recently, you said you gave that revolutionary charge. I'm thinking, I just watched Judas and the Messiah the other night. Fred Hampton is one of my personal heroes. I always teach my students about Fred Hampton. But one thing I always love about Fred Hampton, he just said, look, man, if we bring together all people united for one cause, and that's the betterment of one mankind, then ain't nothing gonna stop us. And so that's my charge to everybody listening, is to reach out to your neighbor, unite, find out what do we need to be successful. And then we hold all systems accountable, the educational system, the governmental structure, everything, hold them accountable to the needs of our community and our people. And if they don't want to be held accountable, then I think it's time to find politicians who will hold themselves accountable to us, or if it comes to it, we can become the politicians and run for office ourselves. It's time for a change, and I want to charge the Richmond community to just step up and make a difference in your neighborhoods and with your children and with the children in your neighborhood. Like Brother Thornton said, it's our kids. One thing I always said when I was in school, there's no such thing as that teacher's kid. If you're in that school building, you're my student. If you're a parent in the Richmond community, all these kids are your kids. And so it's time for us to step up and provide the service in school and out of school for our children to be successful. Thank you. Good night, everybody.